Casey's biggest hits.
2 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was Nothing Compares to You by a singer from Ireland who grew up in a reform school. And that's where she got her first big break. I'll have details and that big hit after this. Coming up on Casey's Top 40, a singer who found the first big break of her career in a place filled with terror, panic, and agony. This week, she has the #1 song in the USA.
Casey's Top 40.
And that means we have a brand new #1 song in the USA on Casey's Top 40. And it's by a singer who found her first big break while living in a place that was filled with panic, terror, and agony. Here's the story. She was born in Dublin, Ireland. She says when she was growing up, her parents' marriage was on the rocks and things were very unhappy at home. So she started hanging around in the streets. And like a lot of kids who hang out in the streets, she got into a lot of trouble, mainly for shoplifting. At age 13, after several offenses, she was sent to a Dublin reform school. She says she'll never experience such panic, terror, and agony again. It was a very harsh, strict place, and if you got out of line, they had a tough punishment. They made you sleep in the upstairs part of the building. No one wanted to go up there, because that part of the building wasn't a reform school. It was a place where terminally ill patients from the local hospital waited to die. To this young girl, the dark and musty atmosphere up there was absolutely frightening. Well, she endured life in that terrible reform school for 18 long months, reading and singing to herself to try to keep her mind together. Then one day, a sympathetic teacher at this school for wayward kids heard the young girl's beautiful voice and asked her to sing at her wedding. That proved to be what turned the 14-year-old's life around, because at the wedding, she met the teacher's brother, a musician who was part of a band, and he liked the young girl's singing so much, he invited her to work with him on a song. Well, the song went on to be recorded by the brothers' band and went on to become a big hit in Ireland. That was the big break that really got this young girl going, not because she made a lot of money, but for the first time in her life, she realized she could be a big success. So after she was released from reform school, she took a series of odd jobs until she finally got the chance to sing at local Dublin clubs. And eventually, that led to a record deal. Earlier this year, she released her second album called I Do Not Want What I Haven't Got. And this week, the first single from that album becomes her first #1. The brand new #1 song in the USA on Casey's Top 40 is Nothing Compares to You by a woman who really came up the hard way, Ireland's Sinead O'Connor.
The hits from coast to coast.
And now we're up to the recent #1 smash by the woman who decided to drop out of school to become a singer. It's just part of the story of 23-year-old Sinead O'Connor. 7 years ago, she was 16 years old, growing up around Dublin, Ireland. Her parents had divorced and she was living with her father. He sent her to a series of boarding schools, including one in Waterford, about 75 miles south of Dublin. Sinead had already discovered music and had started to play guitar and sing in pubs and coffee houses, so she decided to quit school and become a professional singer. But first, she asked for her father's permission. He said no. So one day in the middle of school, without saying anything to anyone, she just walked out and disappeared. Sinead's father told writer Michael Gilmore, I was up a wall. I didn't know where she was. When she did come home, it was plain that she'd made up her mind. And so had Mr. O'Connor. He said Sinead could quit regular school for music school. So he sent her to the College of Music in Dublin. He says, I was hoping that she would get some classical education in singing. She also studied piano. So she's not a naive composer, she knows music. And that's how Sinead O'Connor, with a little help and understanding from her dad, made singing her career. Her recent #1 song is at number 10 this week on American Top 40.
Music.
Sinead O'Connor hopes to have a new album out by the end of the year, but it's going to be an album of 40s standards and show tunes, since she hasn't written any new songs lately. And here's even more surprising news off the O'Connor front. This summer, Sinead starts filming her lead role in a new movie based on the life of Joan of Arc. I did not know Joan of Arc was bald.
Casey's biggest hits. hits.
3 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was Nothing Compares to You by an Irish woman who once delivered kissograms by day and sang protest songs by night. She grew up in Dublin, raised by nuns in a reform school for troubled girls. By the time she was 16, she had run away from the school to find her way as a singer. Work was hard to come by, and so she took a job singing kissograms, birthday wishes she would deliver dressed as a French maid. That was her day job, and she hated it. That's why at night she was willing to sing for just pennies in the pubs and clubs of Dublin, performing anger-filled protest songs by Bob Dylan. These days, most of her music is still a cry against injustice, but not all. You see, 3 years ago this week, she was singing a love song, one of the biggest hits in the USA.
Casey's biggest hits.
4 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was Nothing Compares to You by a woman so insistent on authenticity, she ended a long-time friendship in order to cry real tears while making the video for this song. Sinead O'Connor's idea for the video for Nothing Compares to You was a tight close-up of her face with tears streaming down her cheeks. Now, she could have used artificial tears dropped in her eyes by a makeup artist, but that isn't Sinead's style. So she did something that inspired real tears. For no apparent reason, she told her longtime manager that she didn't want to work with him anymore. He was shocked. He said he didn't know that there were any problems between them. The pain of that breakup helped Sinead shed real tears in the video and sing with genuine pain. 4 years ago this week, this singer who insists her emotions beyond the up and up had one of the biggest hits in the USA.
Casey's biggest hits.
5 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was by Sinead O'Connor, a song she recently sang for the Prime Minister of Israel and the chairman of the PLO at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony in Stockholm. She was the first pop artist to be invited to perform at the dinner that follows the presentation of the Nobel Prize for Peace, a woman invited to perform because of her outspoken calls for peace between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland. And for the many dignitaries assembled, Sinead gave a moving rendition of her biggest hit, along with a prayer that the next prize would go to the person who brings peace to her troubled land. 5 years ago this week, Sinead O'Connor had one of the biggest hits in the USA with the song she sang in Stockholm. Here's Nothing Compares to You.
It's been 7 hours and 50 days.
Counting them down.